Hi everyone, welcome to the Changemaking Without Barriers webinar. My name is Ricardo, my pronouns are he and him. I'm based in São Paulo, Brazil, and I'm a part of Ashoka's Canopy team. The team inside of Ashoka with the mission of helping us reach everyone in our Everyone a Changemaker vision and ensure the true participation of all. For accessibility purposes, a quick self-description. I identify as a cisgender man. My skin tone is light, considered white in Latin America, but Latino outside of Latin America. I have a short brown hair and brown eyes, a mustache and a beard, and I'm wearing a white shirt and my black background is blurred. End of description. It's wonderful to be here with all of you for the launch of our report, Changemaking Without Barriers, Ashoka's insight in the field of disabilities, developed in partnership with the Seneca Trust. Before we dive in, I'd like to invite all of us in this webinar to connect. Please share in the chat your name, where you're joining from, your relationship with Ashoka, and what Changemaking Without Barriers means to you. We have people here from all over the world. Let's connect with each other. Before we get started, I want to make sure everyone knows about the accessibility features available today. To turn on closed captions, look at the bottom of your Zoom window, click on Show Captions or CC. If you don't see it, click on the three dots, More, and look for captions there. Captions will appear at the bottom of your screen. To access sign language interpretation, click in the interpretation button at the bottom of your Zoom window or find it under More. Select the available sign language channel, and if you like to keep the interpreter visible on your screen, he's going to be here by my side. Well, so let's start with our webinar by sharing our goals for the webinar. So the goal of today's webinar are to share a report with the world, to unpack the key findings and insights from the report. The full report will be available for download after the webinar, and to spark conversations through our panel discussion, which we hope will generate ripple effects towards a fully inclusive and accessible world where everyone recognizes their potential as change makers. So the agenda for today's webinar includes welcome and introductions, which we've just started, introduction to Ashoka, our work in the field of disabilities, and our partnership with the Seneca Trust, key findings from the report, panel discussion, and closing next steps. So let's start with a quick introduction to Ashoka's work and our partnership with the Seneca Trust. For those who are new at Ashoka, we identify and support the world's leading social entrepreneurs, learn from the patterns in their innovation, and mobilize a global community to build an everyone a change-maker world through programs in more than 90 countries. We do this through three stages. The first one is identifying and supporting leading social entrepreneurs. The second one is accelerating the Everyone a Changemaker movement. This means that each of Ashoka's strategic priorities, we mobilize a network of organizations to join us in shifting mindsets and reshaping how we learn, work, and live together. And the third one is equipping everyone to be a changemaker. We do this by working with movement co-leaders, partners, institutions, to inspire and enable change-making in the public at large, giving all citizens the confidence and tools to solve problems for the good of all. Since 2022, we have partnered with the Seneca Trust to strengthen intersection of disability, accessibility, and inclusion with social entrepreneurship, systemic change, and change-making. Together, we elected 18 new Ashoka Fellows in this field, generated more than 500 nominations of social entrepreneurs across more than 50 countries, supported efforts to enhance accessibility and inclusion across Ashoka's communities, events, and spaces, recognized that this is an ongoing journey, and analyzed the work of more than 250 Ashoka Fellows in the field of disabilities, identifying the patterns of innovations and strategies among them, as well as the gaps and opportunities, which we are sharing through this report today in the webinar today. I will now invite Deborah Gundle, one of the trustees of the Seneca Trust and our co-leader in this work, to share some words about our journey together. Deborah, thank you so much and welcome.
I am a 60-year-old woman wearing a patterned green shirt. I try to keep fit, and I have my hair back. I'm a fair complexion. So we approached, Seneca Trust approached Ashoka because we believe very strongly that there is an equitable world for everybody in the disability field. But what we have found with all organizations, most organizations, is that disability is overlooked and not set up as a focus or a category to make sure that there's proportional representation. So we approached Ashoka with the idea that they should do a scoping, bring in proportional representation, and by the fact that Ashoka is an organization of social entrepreneurs, we will massively be able to leverage accessibility, inclusion, better lives for people with all. I'm not even going to give a definition of what type of disability, because this, I think, encapsulates although all disabilities are different, with what Ashoka are doing and what different social entrepreneurs are doing, this encapsulates all types of disabilities. So at the Seneca Trust, what we did was we've started out with Ashoka, and I'm looking forward to the report. Ricardo and the team at Ashoka have done a brilliant job, and we're taking this out afterwards, and we'll talk about this at the end, the findings, the reasons for doing it, and the impact this can have by scoping and bringing in proportional representation in whatever the organization is doing. So Ashoka is the first organization we partnered with, and I'm looking forward to going through this report with everyone. We've also been doing it with the International Rescue Committee, with their work with refugees, looking at how mainstreaming their services and provisions proportionally for people with disabilities. And it's my hope, for moving on from this webinar, that we'll be doing it with other social entrepreneur networks, any other organization. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Deborah. We feel very honored to collaborate with you and to have you here with us. We will hear more from you during the panel. And right now, let's dive into the findings of our report. Okay, so let's start with some context about who we analyzed. For over 45 years, Ashoka has identified and supported nearly 4,000 leading social entrepreneurs worldwide. Around 1 in 15 focus on communities of persons with disabilities, and 72 of them identify as part of the community themselves. For this report, we analyzed 252 Ashoka Fellows from 58 countries, elected from 1980 to 2025. And here's how they are distributed across regions. 80 fellows are based in Asia, 68 in Europe, 42 in South America, 34 in North America, and 28 in Africa. The top 5 countries with more fellows in the field of disabilities are India with 33, Brazil with 22, the United States with 19, and Hungary and Indonesia with 11 each. To analyze this fellows' work, we combined human expertise with artificial intelligence. An AI tool called Cartographer, developed by Ashoka's AI lab, processed all the 252 Ashoka Fellows profiles, identifying clusters and patterns across thousands of data points. And Ashoka's Canopy team then reviewed and refined those results, ensuring accuracy and nuance. All profiles are publicly available biographies written at the time of each fellow's election, so they reflect the work they were doing then. Each Ashoka Fellow profile covers 4 areas: their new idea, the problem that they are addressing, their strategy, and their personal background. Before we go further, I think it's important to share the definition of disability we used. For this report, we worked with the definition from the United Nations Conventions on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. As the convention puts it, persons with disabilities include those who have long-term physical, mental, intellectual, or sensory impairments, which in interaction with various barriers may hinder their full and effective participation in society on an equal basis with others. We acknowledge that concepts in this field are socially constructed. However, this is the definition that guided our analysis. Beyond the geography, it's also important to understand who these fellows are working with and for, because disability rarely exists in isolation. The communities they serve sit at the intersection of multiple marginalized experiences. So the top 5 disability types addressed by fellows are psychosocial, addressed by 118 fellows, intellectual by 67, visual by 62, mobility by 55, and hearing by 44. And the 5 most common intersecting backgrounds are children and youth, present in 151 fellows' work, people experiencing poverty in 104, gender in 74, rural and remote areas in 43, and elderly people in 37. This context shapes the patterns, gaps, and opportunities that we share next. And if you want to go deeper, the full breakdown in the report, which we will share at the end of this webinar. So, what are these fellows actually doing to create a fully accessible and inclusive world? Let's look at the patterns we identify across the work. We identify 8 common patterns in their strategies and innovations that these fellows are doing, pointing us toward a promising approach for building a fully accessible and inclusive world. The first pattern is about how change grows. Fellows don't just transform systems, they create spaces, technologies, and methodologies that help agency and leadership flourish in the communities they serve, creating multiplier effects that reach far more than they ever could done alone. 78% of the fellows in this field invest in capacity building, 50% develop new curricula, 53% engage in policy advocacy, and 50% use storytelling and media campaigns. The second pattern is about who they work with. Every fellow in our analysis works in partnership with at least 2 sectors. They see disability not as an isolated issue, but as an intersection of human rights, education, health, and culture. And with that in mind, they build coalitions. Their top collaborators are civil society, families, governments, and educational institutions. The third pattern is about their usage of intersectional lenses to uncover overlooked system issues. Fellows are actually aware that multiple systems of marginalization can develop and reinforce each other, creating unique barriers for people with disabilities who hold multiple marginalized identities. The fourth pattern is about how fellows apply the "not about us, without us" principle in their work. Rather than designing for persons with disabilities, fellows design with them, co-creating solutions that reflect real needs, not assumptions. The fifth pattern is about universal design. Fellows go beyond disability-specific accommodations. They apply universal design principles to reimagine systems, environments, and services, make them inclusive and accessible by design and benefiting everyone. The sixth pattern is closely connected. Fellows create products, services, and spaces that work for people with a wide range of abilities. These include inclusive educational tools, accessible housing, and public spaces designed for all. The seventh pattern is about overcoming segregation through inclusion. Fellows challenge traditional models of institutionalization and segregation by championing inclusive education, employability, and community living, designing environments that accommodate everyone from the outset. And the eighth pattern is about promoting autonomy and agency. Fellows design solutions that give people control over their own lives, reducing dependency, increasing true participation, and centering dignity and self-determination. All the 8 patterns, with detailed examples and strategies, are fully documented in the report. And now that we see what the fellows are doing, let's take a look at the gaps and opportunities of collaboration. So beyond the patterns, we also mapped what is missing, the gaps we need to close, and the opportunities we can collectively pursue. We identify 5 key gaps, both as guides for our own fellowship expansion and as an open invitation to collaborate and collate efforts to close them. So the first gap is what we call intersectional blind spots. This means that some communities where disabilities intersects with other forms of marginalization are still underrepresented in our analysis, including survivors of conflict, single parents, and indigenous peoples. The second gap is about cross-system opportunities. This means that the links between disability and other global crises, such as climate change, migration, humanitarian emergencies, are still largely underexplored. People with disabilities face greater vulnerabilities during natural disasters and serious setbacks during migration, but few innovators in our analysis are addressing these connections directly. The third gap is underrepresentation of self-advocates. Only 29% of our fellows in this field identify as persons with disabilities themselves. This signals the need to actively seek out and support more self-advocates, while also working to remove the barriers that keep them from being recognized and supported as change makers. The fourth gap is about geographic representation. This means that while our fellows span 58 countries, key regions remain significantly underrepresented, including Australasia, East and Central Asia, Eastern Europe, the Middle East, and Francophone Africa. Closing this gap requires both growing Ashoka's presence and the active support of partners. And the fifth gap is what we call population parity. With 1.3 billion people with disabilities worldwide, there's still so much to do to ensure that persons with disabilities have the tools, resources, and enable environments to improve their lives and lead change. Understanding these gaps also help us see where the opportunity lies. Consider this: 1.3 billion people live with disabilities worldwide, and yet only 2% of philanthropic giving in the US goes to disability-related causes, with a mere 0.1% direct at disability rights and social justice. While 80% of people with disabilities live in developing countries, only a fraction of that already limited funding reaches those communities. The gap between need and investment is vast, and that means that the potential for impact is equally vast. From our analysis, we identified 5 concrete ways to collaborate and move the needle. The first opportunity is to fund with system change lens. It means adopting long-term, unrestricted funding partnerships with social innovators. It means investing in the vision, not just on the output, and creating grassroots funding pools that support multi-sector collaboration and cover accessibility costs. The second opportunity is to implement enabling laws and policies. This means that the decision makers at all levels can pass and enforce legislation that support systemic work, from tax incentives and inclusive policy making to mandates that give social innovators direct access to public systems. The third opportunity is to feature innovators in their systemic work. Media makers, educators, influencers, storytellers, and communicators can feature social innovators in their stories, amplifying their systemic change and shifting public mindsets. This can be done through documentaries, digital content, TED Talks, school curricula, media, film, social campaign, and storytelling events. The fourth opportunity is to invest in early exposure and volunteerism. 38% of our fellows point to share lived experience with disability as a turning point in their journey. The schools, companies, and foundations can create structured opportunities for young people with and without disabilities to engage, volunteer, and lead together. And the last opportunity that we mapped is that the 252 fellows mapped here hold decades of practical wisdom. When brought together, they become more than a sum of their parts, creating spaces for them to connect and co-create. Peer learning sessions, joint advocacy, multi-sectoral consortiums unlocks collaborations that no single actor could design alone. The full detail on each opportunity is in the report, available at disability.ashoka.org. A world without barriers, where every person with and without disabilities recognize their own agency, is possible. The fellows in this report and everything that we share today are proof of that. Starting today, our report is available at disability.ashoka.org. So I invite you to download it, share it, act on it, and most importantly, become part of this movement. Here are some very concrete ways that you can help us close the gaps and make collaboration opportunities a reality. nominate social entrepreneurs working in the field to become Ashoka Fellows, fund Ashoka Fellows directly or through Ashoka stipend for new fellows in this field, fund and support collaboration opportunities in effort to close the gaps we identify, and support Ashoka to continue this work. And now, to begin turning these gaps and opportunities into action, and to spark the reflection and the dialogue this work demands, I'm thrilled to introduce our panelists. Deborah Gundle from the Seneca Trust, Ashoka Fellow Lizzie Kiama, founder of Disability Trust, Robin Weis, Executive Director of the Zero Project, and Ashoka Fellow Thorkil Sonne, founder of the Specialisterne and Square Foundation. Thank you all for being here today. You're very welcome. I'll pass the floor to each one of you for a brief introduction, and please include a self-description for accessibility purposes. I will start with Lizzie.
Thank you, Ricardo. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Lizzie Kiama, and I am an Ashoka Fellow and founder of Disability Trust based in Kenya. I am an African woman with brown skin. I have medium length black braids, and I'm wearing a brown dress with cream flowers. Thanks.
Thank you, Lizzie. Please start you.
Hi, I'm Thorkil Sonne. I'm calling in from Denmark. I'm a 65-year-old pale man, and I'm wearing a black t-shirt and sitting in a room with a white background.
Thanks so much, Thorkil. Robin, go ahead.
Thank you, Ricardo. My name is Weis. I'm the executive director at the Zero Project, and currently the sun is shining on my face because we will have a blind baseball tournament in a while, and I'm a 36-year-old white Caucasian male with a 3-day beard, and I'm wearing a blue polo t-shirt and smiling because I'm very much looking forward to the great conversations with the other panelists.
Thanks so much, Robin. And Deborah, I know that you have already introduced yourself, but just for us to introduce our panelists, can you please introduce yourself again?
Hi, I'm Deborah again, 60-year-old woman who tries to keep fit, with a fair complexion, wearing a green patterned shirt. I'm based in London. I'm a trustee of the Seneca Trust, and I'm parent of a 31-year-old young man who has complex needs.
Thanks so much, Deborah. Thank you all so much for your introductions and for being here with us at this very important moment as we share a report with the world. To start our panel, I'd love to ask you, what is your vision for the future of the disability field? I would like to begin with one of our Ashoka Fellows, as they have created the organizations to build a new future. So, Thorkil, will you feel comfortable to start with you?
Yes, thank you. Well, I've been working on creating jobs for primarily autistic people for more than 20 years. Not just autistic people, but people with similar conditions, be ADHD, dyslexia. I call them neurodistinct people. Others would call them neurodivergent people. We've done great strides, but it seems like the problem is growing faster than any solution. You can look at the mental health statistics, school dropout, unemployment rates, poverty rates. I was at a European conference in March, and I learned that the poverty rate is about 20% for all adult European people, and even more, 25% for children in Europe. And as an Ashoka Fellow, I think this is a call for action. It's a call for trying to change minds and systems, not just in Europe, but across the world. So my vision is a world that is fair and square for everyone, regardless of how our brains are wired and what conditions we come from, what life situation we're in. We need a world where we can be different and together. And that's not the case today. If you're different, then you seem to be put in a separate place, not in the middle of our communities. So that's in short what I'm working on. Ricardo?
Thank you, Thorkil. Thanks so much. And this thing that you are bringing about fairness, justice to different people, make me think a little bit about Lizzie that is working with women with disabilities. So, Lizzie, I would love to hear also from you, like when you're working with disability trust, what is the vision, the future that you want to build for women with disabilities, but for everyone?
Thank you. Thank you, Ricardo. As I said, I run Disability Trust. We are a nonprofit that focuses on the sexual reproductive rights of women and girls with disabilities. And you would think in the traditional sense that our work would be very traditional, but because of the realities of experiences of women and girls with disabilities and the inherent creativity and innovation that comes with dealing with a world that has excluded groups such as women and girls with disabilities, we have been forced to adopt a number of creative solutions to advance this work, and spanning from photography campaigns to push the conversations around sexuality and how organizations prioritize the sexual rights of women and girls with disabilities and sees them as sexual beings, to engaging with county governments, from a policy standpoint. So, and everything in between. So for me, I see that the sector or the communities of women and girls with disabilities possess inherent creativity. And if we are fortunate to focus on that creativity at the onset when we are designing systems and programs and policies, if we look at them from a disability inclusive lens, then we as a society are better placed to ensure inclusion for everybody, as opposed to designing solutions, systems, programs that leave out groups of persons with disabilities. Then we are ensured that we would have exclusive models. But the opposite has shown to be true. For example, with our toll-free platform that is run by women with disabilities that responds and provides community care work, we started out targeting only women and girls with disabilities, but now we find men calling in, we find individuals from the LGBT community. We have created a space that is safe enough for everybody to utilize. So that's my vision, that we can adopt the innovation and creativity that our community presents. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Lizzie. I'm so glad to learn about this growth of your work. And as a LGBT person that is very connected to the disability field, I feel very happy to learn about how this community is also being included right now in your programs. And speaking about creativity and different solutions and building safe spaces, I think the Zoro Project Conference is one of the biggest conferences in the field of disabilities, where people share their innovations, creative solutions, and build a safe space. So I'd love to hear from you, Robin. What is your vision for the future of the disability field?
Thank you, Ricardo. So I think on paper, our vision is in the name, the Zero Project, which means a world for zero barriers. And we believe in proven solutions that are scalable. But I think that's what's on paper. I think the reality is, and this ties back to your report and what your fellows also underlined in said report, is that 38% of the fellows believe to invest in early exposure. And this is something that we see as well, because ultimately, to create that safe space that you mentioned, Ricardo, at the Zero Project Conference, we believe it has to be an inclusive endeavor. And inclusive in that sense means persons with and without disabilities. And that we need to move towards not framing what we do as a disability issue, but as an innovation issue, as building a more resilient, innovative, and effective society. Because the reality is we're all going to acquire disability in our lifetime. And the question is, even to those on the call who are able-bodied, when we acquire that disability, do we want to acquire that disability in a society that is more kind, empathetic, innovative, and resilient, or lack thereof? And I think all amongst here in the webinar know the answer to that question. But to Thorkil's point, the challenges often outweigh the solutions that are prevalent. So I think we need to involve more and more individuals outside of our, let's call it a bubble, and to really encourage them to see disability inclusion as a whole of society effort that does not only involve persons with disabilities because it is in their best interest to work in this space, but all of us, because we all benefit from it ultimately. And I think that's the beauty of what we do at the Zero Project. If you look at our over 1,000 awardees within our database, all of them benefit persons with and without disabilities. There would be, it'd be hard to find and pinpoint a Zero Project awardee whose benefit only revolves around persons with disabilities. Be it universal design, be it others, and I see Martin in the chat posting inclusion is a right. Exactly. And I think Marta has said it best, so I'll stop there.
Thanks so much, Robin. Thank you, Marta, for this intervention. Good to see you here with us. But lovely, Robin. Thank you so much for sharing this and how everyone needs inclusion, if not now, someday in their life, in accessibility. And Deborah, you have been leading this effort with us. You have been co-creating the Changemaking Without Barriers initiative. So what's the vision of future that you had in mind when you started to build this with us?
I honestly see the possibility of an equitable future for people in the disability sector. And from this, building on what everybody said here on the panel, at the Seneca Trust, what we're trying to do is approach it. We're all approaching it from different ways, and we need everyone and every approach to work. And our approach, as we've done with Ashoka, is to go to organizations, and we're building and doing this more, to ask them to scope what they're doing and to scope their accessibility for people who are disabled, and to make sure that what they're doing is accessible to people who are disabled, but also to set up disability as a category in their focus areas, because so many people overlook so many organizations overlook disability. And one of the other things that I think is important that I see during my time, my son's 31, so I've been campaigning and active for nearly 31 years. I see that there's a lack of visibility in our societies of people with disabilities. And I think more visibility of people with disabilities would help people to understand that actually accessibility and inclusion is a priority and should be part of the way that society works. An example of this, I think, which is a strong starting point, is I've just been to a faith-based conference which we were involved with, which is about accessibility and inclusion in a faith-based community. And what I said at the conference when I spoke to everyone is in all our prayer centers and community centers, we don't see people with disabilities. I don't see other parents of people with disabilities. And that shows us that we are not a faith-based inclusive community. And I think this is part of something that we are going to start to try to do, is to reach other faith-based communities. And at that point, start being more inclusive and accessible so that we can actually start as a sector and as a group to be much more visible. And that's how people will start to care about who we are, what we're doing, and what our accessibility is.
Thanks so much, Deborah. Thank you. And I think this connects a lot about the early exposure that we mentioned and about the Not About Us Without Us principle. Like, we need to have people with disabilities leading and visible. We need to tell the stories of these people so more people can think about accessibility and inclusion, and this become a norm and not something special or something that we need to add on. But thank you all for sharing your visions. I
I'm
truly look
sorry, can I
forward
just
for the.
add one more thing? Sorry.
Yes, yes, go ahead.
Just an example, like Ashoka's you've done this fantastic report, which is really brilliant. And it's a real roadmap and strategy for each of us to pick different elements from. And anyone who's watching, I hope, will download the report and share it with their networks and their communities, because it's so rich with ideas. Not all will apply, but some will. But just an example of, and this is going to be a direct example, I'm afraid, which I picked out from the report, of what a difference this can make. So Ashoka has been going for years. It's the most wonderful organization. I absolutely love it. But just from this report, I'm just going to pull out one example that shows how important this is. In between 2010 and this is in the report. Between 2000 and 2019, the number of fellows who were working in disability for Ashoka was 93. And in 2020 to 2025, it was 27. That's because there wasn't a focus. Ashoka was thinking about disability, not particularly. It was just ad hoc whether someone was or wasn't disabled or working in the sector of disability. But now Ashoka, after doing the report, understands the idea of proportional representation, which means that, if 16% of our society is disabled, and this also doesn't include people who are temporarily disabled, which we mustn't forget, that too. It just highlights how much actually we can't let the idea of disability as a category be ad hoc. We've actually got to think about it properly and mainstream it in whatever we're doing.
Thanks so much, Deborah, for sharing this. And I think like what you mentioned about our work being more intentional and thinking and helping our colleagues to think about this every month, every year, I think it was important for us to increase this number and be more close to the 60% of people with disabilities that existing across the world. But thanks so much for sharing this. And right now, I would love to hear from you a little bit of the types of collaborations that you think that is important for achieving this vision, and with whom. I think that now we can start with Lizzie, and then we go to Deborah, Thorkil, and Robin.
Thank you, Ricardo. The report highlights, the fact that disability is really not a sector, and it is a systems issue that cuts across health, education, gender, economic inclusion, and it makes clear that inclusion will not come from isolated programs, and it will come from redesigning how systems will work, and that's what we've been trying to do at Disability. Unfortunately, even with the best intentions, a nonprofit will not be able to do all of this work by itself. So we do need, to work with collaborators. But within our programs, we have an employment program that trains and hires women with disabilities to provide community care work to their direct community, provide referrals around reproductive health and gender-based violence. Through that, we then realize there are gaps around capacity building skills. So we also had to develop a platform that provides skills building to these women. And what has happened is that we have extended the skills building because we've realized the lack of disability rights training amongst different referral partners, different stakeholders, government partners as well, even healthcare providers, where our work is situated. So we've had to broaden the scope of our partners to also provide the skills building. Remember, our work is focused on sexual reproductive rights, but then we've had to also include training stakeholders. And then we also have had to, because of the reality, we've also have had to begin collecting data. So then we developed a platform that allows a low bandwidth USSD platform that allows persons with disabilities to self-register themselves, because the reality of disability statistics in the country is lower than, for example, the WHO rate of 16%. Our country statistics talk about less than 4% of persons with disabilities, which is, we think, a little skewed. Our healthcare centers are not in a very good position to collect disability data, so that also puts us at a disadvantage. So we developed this platform to collect data. Currently, we have about 60,000 persons with disabilities registered. It's good for us because at the back end, we're able to then communicate critical messages to this community. But then we also found out we needed to go a step further and kind of loop back all the data and all the evidence that we are getting from our helpline, from our skills training, from the data that we're collecting, and loop it back into government systems and, provide recommendations and action points for governments to pick up on in terms of our advocacy. We needed it to be a little more tangible. So in the grand scheme of things, we work to provide support to communities of women and girls with disabilities. We have to ensure that they are also aware and knowledgeable on their rights and legal frameworks that support those rights. We then have to work with a community of practice that includes healthcare workers, referral partners in the GBV, gender-based violence and reproductive health pipeline. We have to train them on what disability rights look like and what it means to provide services with dignity and equity. We then have to collect data. We have become a technology company of sorts, and then we have to do advocacy with government partners. And also visibility is extremely important. So we work closely with media. So that kind of encapsulates the entirety of the partners that we work with. Sorry to give a long-winded response, but yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I think this is a very concrete example of what we're sharing in the report about how fellows in the field of disabilities are working with intersectional, intersectorial, multi-collaboration spaces and opportunities. So thank you for bringing this very concrete example. And Robin, you spoke a little bit about disability seen as an innovation issue, disability inclusion as a whole society effort. What are the collaborations that you see that it's needed for this? What are the collaborations that Zero Project is pursuing to achieve this?
It's a very good question. I think the honest answer is there's no collaboration too big or too small. I think it involves a variety of sectors, and I think that's one of the beautiful aspects of the Zero Project. And with our call for nominations is that it's open to everyone, public, private, municipality, government, startup, multinational corporations. Everyone has a role to play. We look to Microsoft, Google, and Apple for the scale that they can bring with accessibility issues. But at the same time, we look to small butcher shops and the fact that they are able to make their stores accessible. So I think it requires really an approach where we don't discredit someone because of their size or because of their industry. And that's our approach. I think what we like to see is, as also there are new deliberations on technologies being introduced. Let's take an example from the Zero Project conference with the digital euro. The Austrian National Bank approached us some 1.5 years ago and informed us that as part of the European Central Bank introducing a new currency, they want to get it right from the start. They want to make sure that with a new digital currency, that it's accessible to all persons with disabilities, those who are unhoused, those who face precarious employment situations, and not only thinking of, so to say, digital natives when introducing a currency, but really of everyone. And to me, that's a good example of an approach of bringing in a national bank, which on paper, what would a national bank do at a disability inclusion conference? You might say there's not really a connection there. We would argue that's not the case, because we want to bring in those who perhaps have not so many touching points with disability inclusion, while also entertaining our strong relationships with DPOs, those who are firmly entrenched in the disability inclusion space. So I think it's really being mindful and intentional of who we're trying to reach, and also identifying multipliers. And I think that's an important point. people see the Zero Project conference, what we do, our regional conferences, the technology forum, and we're a small team and ask, well, how do you do it? And the answer, it's not us who does it, it's our network and the network of networks that come with it. So really being able to identify those multipliers who can not only carry out and amplify the message, but identify individuals who are not in the room yet. Identify, quite frankly, also, if we take a self-critical perspective on our industry and look at disability conferences, there are certain disabilities which are underrepresented. And being cognizant of that and asking, well, how can we reach those communities? If we don't see enough visibility, for example, at the deafblind, how can we change that? So we're always mindful and want to improve ourselves and are always looking for people who share that perspective and who want to take that multi-sectoral approach together with us.
Thank you, Robin. I love everything you said. And when you mentioned about everyone has a role to play and identifying multipliers, my head just thought about Thorkil's work, because I think Thorkil's work is very connected to everyone having a role to play, multiplying this vision of inclusion. So, Thorkil, I would love to hear from you, like, in your work, how collaborations have been helping you achieve your vision.
Yeah, thanks, Ricardo. So for 20 years, I've worked in the competitive IT market primarily. We started out as a for-profit because we believed that if autistic people are given the right conditions and understanding, then they can do what they are best at and perform at equal terms as others. And we proved that on market terms in the very competitive IT market. And that drew the attention of the big companies and the business associations, because there's a lack of talent, of resources in most parts of the world. And autistic people, for example, can be brilliant at certain tasks where there are a lot of unfilled jobs. So that was a wake-up call to the IT sector. We later on also went into many other areas, like I'm most proud of our pig farming job creation in Australia. But we also done a lot of job creation on both in museums, because autistic people can be fantastic also in front office jobs, not just in back office jobs. But we have succeeded in touching the heart of compassionate people in resourceful organizations. We made a global partnership with SAP in 2013. They asked how many autistic people are there in this world, and we said probably 1% of any population anywhere could meet the requirements for autism diagnosis. And then they said, okay, we want to be best at knowing our markets, knowing our clients, understanding the talents in the community. So we'll set a goal that 1% of our workforce should be of autistic people within a number of years. The drivers within these organizations have mostly been people who have a close relationship to autistic people, could be as children or siblings or nephews or whatever. There has to be a personal dimension. If the personal dimension can be combined with business savvy skills and organizational skills, then we have a machinery that can work. And Specialisterne has worked with more than 500 companies around the world, and we've been copied by 50 to 100 organizations, because the idea is simple. It's great. There's untapped talent and there's a need for talent. So let's create the environments where talent can unfold and add value for the people and for the businesses and the societies. But we have to find ways to work with companies, because they can take the mission out into the world, and they understand the benefits of something that's working. And when we have proven to them what the people that they normally would not invite to job interviews could do for them, we are now in the phase where we are trying to make them curious that probably 1% or 20% of the world's population could qualify for an autism, ADHD, dyslexia, or similar diagnosis. We call them neuro minorities. That's a lot of people. Every person has 2 parents, some grandparents, maybe some siblings, some nephews, some cousins. And the wake-up call to the world that I think we should make now is that people are different. Everyone is different, not just those who have diagnoses are different. We are all different, and everyone is important. We cannot just sort people out and forget them somewhere. And everyone is good at something, but many have not been given the chance to show what they're good at. My claim is that we are a majority of people who want a different course for the world. There's too much division. We need to find a way to have a universal of understanding of each other's and what it will take for us to shine, to thrive. And the most important thing is also the connection to the human rights, that we should not leave anyone behind. And that is an appeal to many people. It's an appeal to me as a parent of an autistic child. And it resonates with parents all over the world. We want our kids to have a good life when we are not there to support them anymore. And this is more about humanity than anything else. And we need to work much more together as a community here, because none of us can make much change ourselves, but together the 4,000 Ashoka Fellows, my goodness, what a richness of knowledge and lived experiences and barriers do we know of. And I think this knowledge we have to cultivate much more. If we could go to the EU, for example, I mentioned the conference I was at in March, and say, yes, we also read the reports, 20% of all adults are at risk of poverty or exclusion in Europe. So let's work together, do something. Ashoka is too much in the outside the center of where we should be. No one knows better than Ashoka about how to deal with social challenges, find solutions, collaborate, work for the greater good, share our knowledge, and then make people shine. So my experience have been very great working with companies as the enablers. We are associated with the World Economic Forum and the UN. So how can we, Ashoka, World Economic Forum, UN, the biggest companies in the world, the biggest NGO self-advocacy networks in the world, do more together to change minds and systems?
Thank you, Thorkil. And I think this is a very important conversation to have. And I know that you and I and Ole, that I hope it's here, we have been having a lot of conversations around this. And I can't wait for us to start doing more for us to reach a world where everyone can have this good life that you were mentioning, and all the accessibility features and things should everyone experience that good life. Uh, and just because of matter of time, I really apologize to our audience that we won't be able to bring the questions, but I saw that in the chat we were already making questions and our panelists were answering for some of them. And to close today's webinar, I'd like to invite Deborah to answer my final question. That it's Deborah, you as a co-leader of this initiative, of this report, uh, what do you think that we can do now to close the gaps that we mapped and the opportunities that we mapped? What do you think that we can do now? What is urgent?
Well, I think a few things. One, the report really does map out some great ideas and some strategies. And if everyone can just pick something up, and I've said this before, so I'm just reiterating, anyone who's listening to this webinar and any Ashoka Fellows can look around their networks and encourage them to be thinking about inclusion, because we also need to move out of our echo chambers and need to collaborate with other organizations, other useful NGOs, organizations, businesses within our networks, or that are suitable or applicable to what we're doing. We need to actually join and collaborate with other people and bring more and more visibility to people who have disabilities. And I'm also agreeing that this is one of my mantras, and I think it's everybody's mantra here, is that everybody counts, and we need to make inclusion a mindset. I just urge everyone to download the report, use it, share it amongst your networks, and raise awareness with other people to be thinking about how they can be inclusive and accessible.
Thanks so much, Deborah. And I echo everything that you said. Please, and I want to close this webinar with this message of let's collaborate and continue having these conversations, creating this space of collaboration, sharing knowledge, co-creation for a fully inclusive and accessible world. So please download the report, read it, share it with your networks, with your company, with your organization, with your family, and support us by nominating social entrepreneurs working in the field to become Ashoka Fellow so we can grow the number of Ashoka Fellows in the field of disabilities, fund Ashoka Fellows directly or through Ashoka stipends for new fellows in this field, fund and support collaboration opportunities and efforts to close the gaps, and support Ashoka to continue this work. Thank you so much, Deborah, Thorkil, Robin, Lizzie, for being here today, for making this moment so special, for sharing so much wisdom. I feel very honored and lucky to have all of you here. Thank you to all the communications team that is managing this webinar, Tito, Lucia, Celia, our amazing interpreter, Brendo, a lot of colleagues that supported us and former colleagues, Lorena Garcia Duran, Nico Pablo, George Schoen, Ovidio, Kelsey, Isabel. So many people have been supporting us, and I have no words enough to thank you, all of you, for that. So let's continue building this very free world, and please download the report, share it. We want this knowledge to reach the most people that we can. Thank you. Have a lovely day, afternoon, or evening.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Ricardo. Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.